For over 35 years, Todd Garner has overseen blockbuster films like Con Air, Anger Management, Triple X, 13 Going on 30, and the Mortal Kombat franchise.
Why are they letting you make these movies?
Join Todd as he shares tips and stories from the front lines of producing in Hollywood.
I'm Adam Sandler.
I'm Rebel Wilson.
This is Jeff Probst.
I'm Kaylee Cuoco.
I'm Eli Roth.
This is Marlon Wayans.
Hey, it's Ed Helms.
This is Shay Mitchell.
Hey everybody, this is Kevin James, and this is The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide with Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
What a combination.
Welcome to The Producer's Guide. I'm Todd Garner. Well, there's a lot of disruption going on in the movie business. You have distributors such as A24 and Neon and Focus, and they are distributing movies that the studios necessarily aren't, or there's trying to find a different lane and have a different sort of branding. In today's episode, we have two remarkable guests that are also quietly disrupting the current finance and distribution models with their company, 2521 Entertainment. Founded in 2023 by CEO and director David L. Hunt, 2521 Entertainment is making waves with its focus on culturally impactful storytelling. Their impressive portfolio includes hits like King of Kings, the highest-grossing faith-based animated film ever, and the phenomenal Sound of Freedom, which raked in a staggering $251 million globally. They've also delivered one of Amazon Prime's top-ranked series, House of David, and have partnered with Angel Studios on a remarkable 14 projects, most recently acquiring the biblical animated franchise David for a whopping $78 million. Joining us today are two key players from 2521, co-founder Jon Walter and President Christopher Hammond. As an entrepreneur and film executive, Jon Walter leads the creative and financial strategy for the company and the 2521 Film Fund. He served as an executive producer on a host of films and series, including Homestead, Hershey, In Fortune's Shadow, and the animated epic David. And with over 25 years in the entertainment industry, Christopher Hammond has held executive roles in Columbia TriStar Motion Picture Group and is recognized as an authority on film distribution and finance. He's produced the film Shade and has been behind the scenes of True TV's The Takedown and The Merv Griffin Show. Today, we deep dive into the world of an independent finance company that is at the intersection of faith, film, and commerce. Enjoy. I'm here with Jon Walter and Chris Hammond of 2521 Entertainment and 2521 Fund, which is two separate companies. Welcome, guys. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having us,
Great
Todd.
day. It's a good day.
Well, I wanted to have you guys on because we recently did a movie together called Runner, and I have not been that well-versed in the independent space. Runner was one of my first movies to do at that size independently, and you guys were amazing to deal with. So I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about the philosophy of the company and your background, et cetera. So let's maybe start with you, Jon. Tell me like what your background is and sort of what your original attraction to the movie business was.
Yeah, so if you go back to about 2002, Lord of the Rings was always one of my favorite stories. I read it as a kid. And when the movies came out, if you guys all recall, there was an extended edition that came out on DVDs. And there was the behind the scenes looks, the extended edition, basically compilation that came alongside how they made the sets, how they made the clothing, how they did everything from the orcs to the dwarves, whatever it is. And I thought this is the coolest thing ever. It was amazing. So you fast forward from that time to about 2014, there was a film that came out on Noah, actually. It was with Russell Crowe, and it was an interesting take on it. I was a little bit disappointed in the results of it. And I thought, you know what? I think that there are such great stories that are elevated type content. And it's time, I think, to really dig in and start to learn this industry. And met a guy named David Hunt, who we both kind of had the same vision of wanting to tell these great stories, these elevated content stories. And so we started 2521 together in 2019, and he had just got done doing a great story, pun intended, called Greater. which was the true biopic story about Brandon Burlsworth, who was an offensive lineman for the Arkansas Razorbacks. Actually, the Brandon Burlsworth Trophy is given to the best player in college football who began his career as a walk-on. So it's an amazing story. He had really proven that there is a great audience here that wants to see this type of content. And so we have been in a really great position to do, I can't remember, Chris, would you say 24 different pictures over the last 18 months that we've been able to be a part of. So it's been pretty miraculous.
So let me back up a little bit. Where did you grow up?
I am from West Texas. So I'm from Midland, Texas, to be precise, which is oil and gas country. I went to Texas Tech, which is also in the West, in West Texas. And so love this part of the world. It is not very pretty, as you probably can imagine. Landman has done a pretty good job of telling somewhat of what happens in Midland, but I will say most of that is filmed in Fort Worth, and it's a lot prettier in Landman than the actual reality.
And when you were growing up, did you have any interest in the movie business? Did you study anything at Texas Tech that regarded media or anything?
Not really. Not really. I'm a musician, and so I love the arts. Play piano and guitar. I started out with violin, actually, and I sing. But it was really Lord of the Rings that really started to get my love for film, because Peter Jackson did such an amazing job of bringing you into the universe, into something that I don't think we've really seen since, I would argue. And so I think that was a big part of my love of film.
Okay. And Chris, you've been in the business for quite a while. What was your background? What led you to the business?
I started with my dad. My dad was a producer many years ago. I didn't grow up because we moved to San Francisco when I was really young. My dad had been a producer, and then oddly enough took a complete veer left and started the merchandising division for Universal Studios before there was a merchandising. And so it was just him and an assistant. And I think he had a manager working with him. That was the entire department. He did that really well. And they were, I still have, for those of you, anybody who remembers the Munsters, I still have the original cars, the mock-ups of the original cars, and a car guy named George Harris who used to he'd turn anything. He could turn a toilet, a bed, anything would be turned into this car. And it was incredible what he could do. But he created all the Munster mobiles. As the story goes, they were really happy with him. And my dad was like, this is great, but I grew up in LA and I think it's time for us to move on. And I appreciate the offer to run this new thing, but good luck on that studio tour and the theme park. I'm sure it'll be great. And then off to San Francisco we went. So kind of missed that opportunity. But anyway, so he was, I think I got the bug from him. I was always in the movies, and I went to school in Santa Barbara, and we had a guy named Paul Lazarus. And he was the head of the department back then. And he had run production for Warner Brothers under Jack Warner. Class was class, but class was just story after story after story, and just how amazing Hollywood can be and all things. His son went on to do like Westworld and the original Westworld, a Capricorn One. And it just sort of built on that. And I was like, okay, this is something I want to get into. And then when I came to LA, I got fortunate, bounced around a little bit, ended up at Columbia TriStar, and got a chance to move around to different divisions. And then I was kind of in. Then I was hooked. Despite the fact that my father hanging his head going, please, anything else, don't get into film. Please do something else.
Well, 24 movies in 18 months. You guys are doing great. What is the pitch of 2521? When you're out talking to filmmakers and talking to distributors, what is the philosophy and what is the pitch for 2521?
Yeah, I think it's mainly on that elevated content type, right? We want to tell stories that really speak to the soul. We want to tell stories that that are incredibly entertaining, that elevate specific stories to a point that people understand and intrinsically get. But we do not want to necessarily be pushing an agenda whatsoever. I think if you ever push an agenda, the audience, for the most part, I would say, wants to reject it. They see it, whatever that agenda is, they don't want to be preached at in particularly. So we always want to tell stories that, again, really stir the soul, that speak to the soul. Our first big story out of the gate was the David animated story. And we're proud to be partnered with Sunrise and Angel on that particular project. And I think that's an exact kind of epitome of what that talks about right there, right? Where you have an individual who really is insignificant. He's a hobbit per se, right? He doesn't really have much influence. He really doesn't have much of a chance of being impactful. And yet, because of the circumstances, because of the place that he was put into, now he has the potential really to be someone great. It's like the superhero movie, right? Everyone loves superheroes because they think of themselves as a superhero. So that's kind of, that story is kind of an epitome of the really the love of the film and the stories that we would love to tell.
And Chris, walk me through kind of the nuts and bolts of what 2521 actually accomplishes, what you offer when you come in. How does the financing work? Just walk me through the nuts and bolts of what 2521 has to offer anyone in the business who's looking to partner with you guys.
Let me add on to one thing that Wally was saying there. The thing that's really interesting is people always say, well, like, what genre, do you guys like? And I would say we're actually genre agnostic, because even though we started with David, which is obviously a biblical story, when you look at the movie that just premiered last night called Brink of War, that's a historical thriller with Reagan and Gorbachev. And it speaks to us because it's two guys who are the big heads of the biggest superpowers in the world. One calls the other and says, I know we don't like each other, but I got 35,000 warheads pointed at you. You got 35,000 pointed at me. How about just you and me get in the room and see if we can not blow up the world? And that's something that they did. And you go, okay, if these guys can do it, why can't other people do that too? Why can't we start a dialogue? So that's the kind of story that speaks to us. We've got Runner coming out, which obviously we did together.
We had Young Washington that just came out.
We
as
did
well,
Young Washington.
Perfect.
There's a lot of things that those underlying stories is what speak to us. I mean, if somebody came to us with a great action film or it'd be hard to see a horror film, but sure, it could be. We're open to it. So, as far as the nuts and bolts go, and this is sort of speaks to, if I can actually say how I bet Wally and David, the founders. So I have another world where I release films in theaters, and I released that movie Greater. Oddly enough, that was 10 years ago. And I can tell you that Wally and David were onto something, because I still get checks for that to pass on to the producer every 3 months. It is never off major streamers. It's just constantly out there. There's a love for that movie. So I knew that there was something there. And here's the thing about them. Because they know where money is in town and I know how to get movies in the theaters, I get approached fairly often, not because of who I am, but my two worlds of knowledge are very useful to people. And I usually give them a little spiel about, sure, you come into town with money. And Todd, you know this. There's too many people come to town with money, don't know what to do with it. It usually gets lost somewhere along the way. And I gave them the usual spiel, which is, you're going to do gap financing, you're going to do P&A, you're going to do bridge loans, you're going to do everything that is not sexy about Hollywood, until the town realizes that your money is real, and that when you say the money is going to be there, the money is going to be there, and it really shows up, and that you know how to play well with other people, and that, so that you can work in teams or co-produce and things like that. And after all of that spiel, which is a long spiel, everybody else has always said to me, that's great, but we think Hollywood's broken, and this is what we're going to do different. And I always know, okay, well, you're going to lose all your money. These guys, Wally, David, paused for a second, and they said, so that's the path to success. And I said, yes, it is. And they said, great, let's do it. And for the first, I mean, I got out on 2021, I think it was 2021. And they have not veered from that. And it's a testament to these guys and the fund. Our investor fund have been very supportive, but that's what gets us all these movies. And so when you say, what are the nuts and bolts? We come in at pretty much everywhere. Because we're a cash player, people can come to us very last minute when they're, we're not vulture capitalists about it. We're actually surprisingly nice about how we do our money. But we're probably not the people that are going to come in and say, let's develop, because that's going to take our money out of circulation for a long time. And right now we seem to be filling a role where, like Runner, where you guys had done so much stuff and we're like, hey, we could use this extra piece. Could you guys come in and da-da-da? And it was like a wonderful fit. And it's been a fantastic partnership with you. We've kind of fallen in pretty much everywhere else. We've come in early on in the production. Wally, Drummer Boy,
Young
which
Washington,
is coming out.
We were really early on in the production.
Yeah.
Brink of War, we were right after basically the script was done. We joined with SK Global. Yeah, there's several. Homestead was probably, we came in pretty late on that one. Wing Feather was season 2. So we kind of, just like Chris is saying, we came in all over the board. Hershey was one that we have coming out in November, and we came in really late on that one as well. One of the nuts and bolts I think I would add to that is, and you know this, Todd, the relationships are the biggest part in this industry. And when you have kind of the community and the relationships in these different production companies, and you do right by them, and you do what you say you're going to do, it goes a long way.
Well, yeah, you can't do it you can do it, but you can't do it for very long if you're going to fuck people over continuously. So,
Right.
It's very easy to try to throw you guys into that faith-based box. I mean, that's sort of like the easy thing for people to say, oh, those are the faith-based guys. Oh, and when you say elevated content, what you really mean is religious content. And listen, for somebody who worked at Disney for 10 years and who has made a lot of movies like you're talking about, all between like Remember the Titans, which was very elevated and feel good.
Awesome.
I mean, basically every movie I made from 1990 to 2026 has been an uplifting ending. I mean, that's why Runner at the face of it doesn't look like a quote unquote faith-based movie, but it has a elevated spirit, and their mission is an elevated mission to save this little girl's life. And I would also put Amblin in that box. Spielberg does that very well. And I would say to you guys, when people have asked me about working with you guys, my pitch is always like, well, it was like anything Amblin would make. Like, you guys would have made E.T., you guys would have made Lord of the Rings, you guys would have made Remember the Titans, you guys would have
100%.
made, Star Wars probably. So it's like I think there is this. It's an odd misnomer, just maybe because of some of the early movies you guys worked on, that is really your North Star, when really your North Star is uplifting the human spirit and making sure that people come away from the movie feeling good and not depressed or not feeling good for whatever that means.
Yeah,
I think why
thought-provoking films too is a big key of that, right? There are pieces that just walking out of a film and feeling great about it is awesome. We also want to do ones that people really think through and go, like, you remember Inception, when Christopher Nolan's Inception came out, how many people talked about, was it real at the end? Like, those stories are exactly what we want to tell. Those are fantastic. And that's exactly the elevated content that you're talking about, Todd, that we would love to be a part of. And have been on some of the slate that we have coming out this year.
Wally, you're more of a newcomer, and Chris, you've been in the business. You're generationally in the business. When you guys first started this fund and this company, what was your first inroads to start making these relationships? What were some of the first calls? What were some of the first meetings? How did people at first find you guys?
A lot of not returned phone calls, a lot of doors. Like, that was a very tough start. Not that we weren't prepared for that. It's the same thing with no knock on the agencies, But, for the first year, they gave us everything that nobody else wanted to make, but that's still sitting on their shelves. Well, let's throw this past them and see. So we had to wade through a lot of not good material to get to all of a sudden people were like, oh, you're real.
And Brink of War was that example, right, Chris? I mean, that is the first one that was brought to us by the agency that we all went, oh, this is awesome. Yeah, give us this.
Yeah, and that was funny because that was William Morris, and they actually said, because they were smart, actually. At a certain point, we were like, no, no, no. But we kept trying to say, let's sort of not just sort of say, let's narrow the field a little bit. And then one of them calls and said, hey, I think I got one that works for you guys. And he sent us, and it took us, the good thing, we have 5 people in our company. So it took us a weekend to we read it and we're like, this is great, let's do it. And we were on the call, on Tuesday we're making a movie. There was no, let's run it up the pole, let's do all this stuff. We moved really fast.
And in order to move really fast, what are some of the metrics you guys are using? Because to read something like Brink of War and commit to it, what models are you using? You guys don't have a deep bench of models or comps. What does the decision making look? Let's use Brink of War. Walk me through the decision making process there. William Morris. I completely understand narrowing the field really helps them, because look, I don't think anybody in the business is not looking for cash. Like, Chris, when you said, oh, there's too many people with money, I would never say that ever in my entire life, that there's too many people with money.
Yeah.
I would love for more people with money to come in. So I don't think anyone is like saying, those guys with money. I think narrowing your focus was very, very smart, because it gives the agencies and also management companies and filmmakers, I know what lane those guys are in. They're not just trying to do the typical foreign sales gap, see if we can cobble it together, see if the, pay a action star $1 million for a day and put him on the poster and see what sticks. The more you can hone it in, I'm sure that really helped the agency. And so William Morris gives you this script. Walk me through the decision-making process of the 5 people that read it and made that decision.
Let me answer, move back a tiny bit, and then I'll let you answer that specific question, Chris. But I think one of the things that we do that is, I think, a little different than most production companies is we have a specific brand that we're looking to do. We're looking to actually execute on. And David Hunt, who is a co-founder alongside me, does an excellent job of making sure that the films, the projects that we're a part of, meet the criteria, whether that be intrinsic value, whether that be a script that stands on its own merit, whether that be expanded IP from the particular project we're looking at. Those are always the group of details that we look at when we're evaluating a project. So it always starts with the story. It always starts with, if we did this, would we be proud to be behind it? And does it kind of do, on the branding side, does it actually solve what we are trying to accomplish here?
Yeah, I think that's the first step in anything. The way it comes in is we all accept submissions. There isn't go through one person kind of a thing. And that person, whoever comes in through, sort of shepherds it, and they take the first read. And in this case, it was a quick read, and I, turned to the rest of the group and was like, here's the story, here's what it is. And everyone was excited about the thought of that, and did a quick read on it. And then it was easy to come back and say, let's look at the numbers next. David, of course, the first thing he does is, as Wally was saying, ticks off the 4 or 5 things that we're interested in doing. And as long as it stays within that sort of forum, then we can quickly move forward. And if we like it, and then our head of, he's chief operating. He's really probably close to chief revenue officer, I think is probably a more apt title.
We all have to wear a lot of hats with only 5 of us.
Yeah, exactly. We do it all. Yeah. He has a strong finance background as well. He's financed a lot of movies in the past. And between him and myself and getting everybody's creative input, we have a fairly good idea if we're going to make our money back and whatnot. If people are invested in a film fund, they are probably not trying to make their $1 million on that film fund. They just don't want us to lose the money. And they want to stand behind the movies like we do. They know what our mandate is and they believe in that. I don't think anybody is trying to like say, hey, my goal is to buy a private island off of the earnings from my film fund investment. They want great films. And so far, we're doing pretty well on our annual calls. And we say, here's all the movies that are out. Here's all the movies that are coming. They're pretty happy. And they're, fortunately, knock on wood, the returns have been quite good. So that works out well. That's really the process. That 4 steps. Somebody gets it, likes it. David takes a look. The rest of the group, we run the numbers, and that's it.
Let me back up just a smidge. What is the actual meaning of 2521?
Yeah, it comes talking about a film-based deal here. It comes from Matthew 25:21, actually, which is the parable of the talent when Jesus tells the steward, "Well done, good and faithful servant." So that kind of puts us into the faith a little more adjacent type conversation, but that's kind of why we are all doing what we're doing.
Right. And when you say branding, you talk about the 2521 brand. It is very much when people invested in Disney, they invested in Disney. They wanted to be part of that brand. They wanted to be part of that. And the thing about Disney was if you saw the Disney label on it, you could bring your family and you knew that you were not going to have to explain something crazy to them or cover their eyes or whatever. It meant something. And I completely understand that naming your company after that, and that is your foundation, guides the way of the kind of branding you guys want to do, which is again, I don't think just because there is this foundation that it all has to be religious either. Like we said, like all those movies we talked about, whether it be Remember the Titans or Lord of the Rings or Schindler's List or any of these movies that you guys would have made, thought-provoking. I just think that's a good North Star. And it's also good for people to understand, oh, that's the kind of movies you guys make, whether you're an investor or you're bringing you guys movies. When you're looking at your revenue stream, are you assuming theatrical? How does the theatrical versus streaming world play into your decision-making process once it's past the other 3?
Every time we're looking at something, we're big believers in the theatrical marketplace. We want this out to as many people as possible. Not that we've had to pull this ripcord, but I can always put it out. We can always self-distribute. You know, we have the means through my company, and we have the P&A money through the film fund. So we have yet to have to do that. We've been very fortunate. We've always found distribution and good quality distribution for our films, but that's our primary thing. I'm sure there'll be movies that we decide this is smarter to do for a variety of reasons. It's smarter to go direct to streaming, but that's a choice. We're always going to go theatrical first.
Yeah, and if I were to add anything to that, it would be that if we're looking at an episodic series, it has to make sense in the finances, right? So David is a great example. We have the IP completely of the characters and everything of David. We would love to make a new series with David. And so we are actively looking at that, but it has to make sense because that would, on a financial standpoint, because that one's going to be straight to Angel, most likely. So that's an example where it's a little different than the theatrical run of the narrative films, but we are looking at kind of from a financing standpoint, which projects can, just this expanded IP concept that I was just talking about, what can continue on that doesn't just have one avenue of revenue.
I was very interested in your model and Angel's model anyway, to look under the hood and really kind of understand how it operated, because I'm definitely going to be getting a lot more into independent financing and just the way the business is headed. And I think that it's time to make a bigger pivot in that direction. So I was really interested in working with you guys and seeing how Angel worked to kind of really understand how these kinds of disruptive models can actually work. And so it seems very fortuitous that you and Angel found each other. Did that happen right away? Tell me about that relationship when that really, because I also am going to be saying the same things, Angel, because I know they are in the same boat. They want to be Disney. They want to be Amblin. They want to be, that's why Runner was so important to them. They want to be a bigger, broader canvas to paint on than just the perception that they're a faith-based company, despite their title as well. So walk me through how you guys found them and how that kind of aligned, because it is a very, very kind of symbiotic relationship that you two have found.
Yeah, I met Angel when they had just done the second season of The Chosen. So I met the Harmons. So this is before they had released any theatrical film, and they had a pay it forward model that looked like it was going to disrupt the market there. I think it worked with The Chosen, no doubt about it. What they ended up becoming, it was a good starting point for them. And so on Sound of Freedom was actually the first one that 2521 partnered with them on. So that was their second theatrical release. Everyone and their dog knows about Sound of Freedom.
Yeah, not a bad one to partner on. How did that come about? Did that come from you to them to you?
So it was just like Chris was telling you early on when me and David got into it and said, how do we become successful? It's all the little things here and there. And this one was based off of a P&A financing structure where we got to see what the film was already projected and could basically finance the P&A portion of that, which worked out great for them. And I would say there is probably not a better relationship in the industry than 2521 and Angel together. I think what we've been able to help them on, what they've been able to help us with, is second to none. And we have a good relationship with Wonder as well, but we just have so much more history with Angel. Every project we are a part of with Angel, actually, whether that be on the P&A financing or whether it be on producing, like we did on Brink of War, whether it be, like Runner, what we did with you, Todd, on it. It kind of is all in between. We would love to see them continue to grow because they are a disruptor, and how they do what they do is impressive. And so we're helping them in any way we can. And Wonder. So us being able to have David as the #1 Netflix movie for 10 days, and then have the #1 series on Amazon and House of David with Wonder. It's been great relationships on both those sides, but Angel's been awesome.
It is funny though, because Angel kind of goes, struggles with the same sort of faith-based thing that we do. Granted, some of the movies we've done are clearly sort of in that world, and Jeff will tell you, Angel is not, and Wally, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's my understanding that Angel Studios is not about angels. It's angel investors. That's the whole thing. It's angel investors. And that's what it was. Because it was like, hey, let's get a group of people and see, hey, will you put this together? And then it was like, well, these are all angel investors. We'll call ourselves Angel Studios. They're stuck with Angel Studios now. And now everyone's like, oh, faith-based. That's it. But they're not going to pick up Runner if they're, well, they might if they're a faith-based. But I mean, they're like, we want to do more.
Yeah, theirs is we want to promote light, whatever sheds light. Yeah.
The best way I can describe it is Disney. I mean, the Disney was the same way. Before it really became just huge Marvel and Star Wars and everything. When I was there, nothing came before the brand, just like you. When a script came in, you could not do anything to disrupt the brand. And the brand stood for something, and it was a bit amorphous what it stood for, but you knew what it stood for. And so I think that is how both of your companies are striving to expand. And I am all for having more theatrical distribution companies and more companies that are good people financing movies. So I'm rooting for very, very much for both of you, clearly, because we're aligned for the next couple months specifically.
Right, yeah.
But even beyond that, I'm definitely rooting for you guys to continue to grow and expand in the breadth of your content.
Can I say one thing about your pivot, which I think is a really smart idea? Obviously, because I'm in it, but I mean, I think it's as a backhanded compliment to myself there. It's a smart idea because I look around and go, like, there's all these smart producers like yourself and others, and the movie studios are really they're taking big swings. I mean, these are big budget movies. They're really, and the thing is, now there's nobody in that what we used to call the mid-level budgets back in the day, in that like 12 to $17 million range, and go a few million above and a few million below. There's nobody in that world anymore. And I make the argument that that's the area where stars were made. You're not making big movie stars off of a streaming service. And it's hard to launch a movie with a nobody at a 50, 60, $70 million budget and say, this guy's a star. These mid-level budget things are where people start noticing and going, hey, that person's really good. We got to focus on them. And so I think there's a world for us independents and independent financiers. Like, we can get the screens now, and we got P&A money. And I'm not saying I'm saying that's the ecosystem of this sort of burgeoning world. It's almost like in the 70s, and this is a long way back, but in the 70s, there was no independent. And then all of a sudden, you got the John Cassavetes of the world, and all these guys are like, I'm going to do my own thing. And they created this whole new area, which then has now grown over time. And in our world, now these are these mid-level budgets that you can make some really solid movies for that. You can make solid movies for $8 million. And I feel like there's an opportunity in the marketplace. And I think you got a lot of people that are quality people that could do great work in that space.
That is big. One of the biggest reasons that I am making that pivot is in this space, as I have done this movie independently. I did a couple comedies independently a couple years ago, and I did a horror movie independently. And now I have a big run of movies that I'm going to be doing independently. Why I'm attracted to it so much is it's very producer driven, and meaning that good producers, and not I mean taking talent or taste out of it, just good, solid producers that are hardworking and know what they're doing and know how to put a movie together and be on set and run a successful production in terms of budget and time, and can have some modicum of history of success. So they kind of, even if you kind of understand storytelling and what you're doing, the independent world really leans on producers, and it's actually a valued craft. And so I like the fact that in the independent world, it's much more producer driven. And if you are a producer that has some history and has good relationships and hasn't burned people and is honest and can just tell people the truth and really run a production, that it feels better to me. It just feels like my talents are much more valued, and it just feels like it's more rewarding. From your perspective, because you guys have done quite a few movies now, what was your perspective of producers going in, and what is your perspective of producers now? And I mean this honestly and sincerely. Can you tell the difference? Like, have you noticed, like, wow, that's a good producer, or wow, that's not a great producer? Have you noticed? And kind of, if so, what is your feeling about it?
There's definitely a personal responsibility in the independent world that doesn't exist as much I think, in the studio world. I think in the independent world, there seems to be kind of a collaboration, more collaborative kind of values that are going along with the stories. And so I think definitely that is occurring. On the relationship side, I just think that the producers in the independent world specifically, you really need to do right by people. You need to actually treat them the correct way and not run over people and not kind of say my way or the highway. And that's where I'm saying the collaborative efforts really come into play. But you also have to be very creative, not necessarily in talking about on a story basis, but creative from a financial standpoint, creative from a hiring standpoint, from who you have on set. I think that is actually what has begun to occur in an underserved market, especially with what Chris was talking about in this $8 to $18 million budget. You have to be very creative to get done. You can't, it's not going to just be rolled out for you. So you have to be kind of a bit of a hustler. And I think that's what you're getting to see more of is guys that are like, I see an objective. I'm going to accomplish this. Whatever obstacles are in my way, I'm going to allow other people to help me get there. But that's where we're going.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting thing because I come at it so differently. Like when I showed up on the runner set, I was like, well, I'm supposed to be here for 2 weeks, but it's running smooth. You just sense it. You're like there and you're like, okay, this is a well-oiled machine. This is moving smoothly. I felt that on Reykjavik Brink of War when I showed up in Reykjavik. And I just like, you felt there was a control on the set, which allowed the creatives to be creative. They were protected. They were, and it was just a well-oiled machine. So even though when the pressure was on, they knew how to pivot. They knew where to take here, put there. They know they're going to put back there, but all this kind of good stuff that you want to see from the producer and your line producer. I think the first tip off for me is the first entree. If I get some sort of a thing, an email, and it's just like, oh, the comp titles are Little Miss Sunshine and Juno and Big Fat Greek Wedding, and they list off all of the major ones that the one hit that year. I'm like, okay, these guys are trying to snow me, and what are you doing? So if somebody comes in, most of the time, people come to us through somebody else. There'll be somebody that we've worked with, and we'll get a referral, and they'll be like, hey, you should talk to this guy. He's got something. And that's a good way to come into us because now someone's vouching for you. So there's already a reference there, and that's a great filter system. I think for us, we just seeing the honesty and if somebody's like, hey, I'm not that great with this, but I have a partner in this that is. Like, I'm not the best business guy, but my partner is the business guy. I'm the on-set guy, and I will make sure that whatever, however you want to come at it, but you can just tell. And I'm talking to you, Todd, and even though like you can smell it, you walk on a set and you're like, this place is a mess. Something's not right. So when we talk to other people too, so
yeah, and the thing about it is, if you look again, we started off this conversation this way. If you want to have any longevity in the business, you have to do right by the talent. You have to do right by your investors. You have to do right by the filmmaker. Otherwise, you're going to be one and done. I mean, I always tell people there's nowhere to hide after like the third day of a 10-hour day or 12-hour day on the set. Like who you really are as a person comes through. And the fact that, if you treat people well and you just meet them where they are, and especially the actors and the filmmakers, you'll get to work with them a lot. What I do find is people can be officious, and they can be hustlers, and they can get stuff done, but eventually it runs out and the talent doesn't want to repeat because it's not a great situation. That's why I also love this idea of doing things independently, is because you really are leaning on those relationships quite heavily, because it's not like you're just paying people to be there. They're the biggest quote they've ever got or whatever. You have to all want to really be there.
Yeah, I'll give two examples, I think, that are with what you're saying there, Todd. In addition to this creative mindset of in the independent world, on Young Washington and on Drummer Boy, which Drummer Boy is a project that we are involved in. It's a musical set in the Revolutionary War time frame. It's very good. I'm very excited about it. But both of those, Chip Diggins is a producer the main producer on set, and he did a very good job of making $1 turn into $5, turn into $7, because you are very much constrained on the budget and you want it to feel big. You don't have the Patriot style budget here, like with Young Washington as an example. So how do you get creative with the film, with the funds that you have, is actually very intriguing to see. And I'd say on those two projects in particularly, because of all of the different scenes that we had and the different action scenes specifically that we had, it was very, very well done. And I think those dollars turned into much bigger than what the actual budget was.
Well, Chip, I've worked with Chip before. We were at Disney together at the same time. He's been doing this a long time. He's an adult. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to produce. He's been on both sides. He's been on your side. He's been on the producing side. He's been on the distribution side. So he completely understands the business at a core level. When you get somebody like that who's really competent and can make not only the dollar stretch, but make the quality good and run a great, safe, amazingly well-run set and treat the talent right, that's a good person to hang on to. And Chip certainly is that in spades. He's a great producer. What I also like about what you guys are doing is when you talk about the quote unquote middle, Chris, a lot of times when people think of independent movies, they think about like foreign sales, big action, with
Yeah.
just an action star that people recognize in Europe, or a really like a small, intense drama that is actor bait and people are going to want to reduce their fees for because it's just like this cool potentially awards winning movie. What I like about what you guys are doing is you're disrupting the business by taking that idea of doing the middle, a little bit more than 17 sometimes and a little bit less than 8 sometimes, and really looking at commercial movies that are uplifting, that are special, that make you think and are thought provoking, but that are at their heart commercial. And I think that's a really cool shift because those movies used to be really relegated to the studio space. And if the studios didn't want them, and as we're seeing, the buyers are starting to potentially condense even further, that the idea that there is this independent world out there where we can go back to making those movies that I grew up loving, those commercial movies that were made for a price, that I think that's really great for the business, because as we're seeing, like, new people are popping up like Black Bear and Angel and these different companies and Vertical are popping up that are filling the void of the place that the studio abandoned.
That's exactly right. And I think, with Young Washington and being in that same vein of Young Washington, the fact that on our 250th anniversary of our country, no studio had
Yeah.
anything concerning our founding, like,
Yeah.
kind of bizarre to think about, right? So that's another advantage of the independent world is you're not constrained by what the top executives are telling you, right? You're again trying to be creative in what you can do. And so with what we're trying to accomplish with Wonder and Young Washington is now we're doing 1776. And what else can spurn from that, right? You could do episodic series on the founders. You could do all kinds of different ideas that are exactly with what I think we all grew up loving watching, not necessarily just about our country, but about great stories, right? We just want to see great stories. And those are some of the best stories ever told. And they're also true, which is pretty fun.
This is something that the studios didn't do. We were lucky that, Wonder had this project and we were behind it. And I don't know, I think we clocked in around 53 million this last weekend or something like that. And so financially we can point and say we're in a market that's working. And so that was my toot our own horn a little bit of like, we're not so far, again, not terribly wrong. We're doing okay as far as that goes. Sorry, you were saying?
Well, no, you're right. I mean, I don't think it's intentional that the studios have abandoned that space, but I think they've abandoned that space because their agenda isn't looking in that direction any longer. When I was at Disney, we made Miracle and The Rookie and Remember the Titans
Awesome movies.
These movies,
great movies,
and uplifting sports movies. And then, when I was during that period, they made The Patriot, they made these Braveheart, they made those kind of now the Odyssey is just sort of blowing the lid off that, but they made those movies they made those movies that really were historical and uplifting and made you feel heroic, and the score made you feel like you wanted to go out and play a sport. And so I think that that's great that you guys are looking to that space too, because the people aren't making Remember the Titans and those Miracle and Rookie any longer, and which is too bad. And those were always a really good box office for us. And what they weren't like billions of dollars, but I think Titans made $120 million, and so
I'll take
I
that.
think
it's
I
great that
watched
you're
Remember the
looking.
Titans 3 times in theaters.
It's a great
Yeah,
movie.
it was great. It was a very, very fun one to work on. Where do you guys see the business headed? Because the traditional buy of the movie business, with the exception that this year is kind of being very robust in the marketplace, beyond this recent sort of resurgence of these movies working in theatrical, it really was sort of a depressing view of the business. Theatricals on the wane. Kids don't want to go see movies anymore. Certainly no one would have expected a young Washington with no TV, very few TV spots, if any, and just this kind of very guerrilla marketing aimed at just the middle of the country, and if anybody else wanted to come see it, so be it. But it's obviously made $53 million, so a lot of people did want to see it. Where do you guys see the business headed from your kind of disruptive point of view?
For one thing, I have no idea.
Yeah.
One thing I know is the future is very impossible to predict. I think that there's going to be some big time disruptors, though. I think that there is. I think Angel is one of them. I think Wonder has an amazing voice. I think us being a part of that is going to be important as well. But I really do think that there's going to be more and more stories like this that families can be a part of, that are specific to females, that are specific to males, that all kind of have this elevated content feel. And I think that the industry in general, I think this may be unpopular, but the superhero kind of story right now is kind of reached its limit. The audience doesn't really want to see superhero movies anymore, and you're seeing that with Marvel, you're seeing that with DC in a big way. People want something original. They want something that is not just a remake. And uh, so I think that there's going to be some creatives that are going to step in to fill a gap that is pretty large right now. And I think John Irwin's that type of guy. I think David Hunt is going to be that type of guy. I think there's some creatives that are going to find a voice and really fill something that is, just like Chris already said, an underserved market in a big way. But, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. And before you take this, Chris, I would also say, regardless of whether or not there is superhero fatigue, because don't forget, Spider-Man's about to make $2 billion. But
Fair enough.
I think okay. I think that there's room. Your point is well taken, though. I think that there's room also for other things that I think that. Again, anytime there's prognostication, as you were right to say, of the movie business, it's always disproven. So I think that the way to look at superhero, quote unquote, superhero fatigue is just that if it's like, I always use the analogy of an ice cream store. If you only have vanilla, chocolate, and mint chip and strawberry at your ice cream store, even though those might be the 4 most popular flavors, after a month, you're going to be like, I don't want to go to the ice cream store anymore. So I do believe if it's the only thing we give the audience, that they are going to get fatigued. And yes, you can have an outlier like Spider-Man that's original and feels good, that makes a lot of money. But I do believe beyond that, you guys coming in and offering butter pecan and Rocky Road and different flavors is great.
Yeah.
Is
Baileys
great
and
for the
cream.
business. Exactly. Is great for the business and great for the audience. I'm sorry. I just wanted to interject there. Chris, what's your feeling of the future?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I would also say something you said in an earlier podcast where basically you were saying that like it's cyclical, and every time somebody says the movie business is down or or I think it was Jason Blum you were talking to, and you were saying, yeah, the horror movies are dead, and it's like, all right, no, they're not, I just feel like nobody knows. What's the whole thing? Nobody knows nothing.
Right.
I would say there's a twofold thing, and I don't want to disparage the studios because I was at Columbia and TriStar, so and I understand that. I think, like you said, they have different owners now. I mean, they report to a different group that have different things. And you were at Disney, there's a lot of slices of that pie that has to be addressed with every movie that comes out. I think and so I think that's great because there's these big events and it brings people to the movie theaters, and I think that's great. I know from when I book theaters into theater chains and I talk to a lot of the smaller ones, not just AMC, Regal, Cinemark, but the mid-level guys, almost always they're like, look, I can't play 7 screens of my 8-plex on one film. They're like, I've got to fill I need to fill that out. And almost always they're like, do you have a family film? Do you have anything that the family can go see? Because I don't have anything right now. And or they haven't had for a while. So I think there's opportunities there. I think the studios will keep doing what they're doing, and I'm really happy about that. But I think the trick is because they serve a different master, so to speak. There are different people above them now. Whereas before, back in, not to sound like old-timey thing, but back in the old days, when the top guy was Jack Warner, or, pick one of the other studio heads, that was the top guy. And in this world that we're in of where these mid-level things, if we're going to call them that, those are movie producer driven. Those are the top dogs there. Those are the ones that are like, hey, we're movie lovers. We want to make great movies. We want to speak to the audience. And I'm not answering to somebody else. I'm just going to make sure that we make money so that we don't go out of business, And I think that's where I think you're going to see more people. You got Wayfarer, you got SKG. There's different other people out, like you mentioned, Black Bear. There are other places that are coming to play that are being smart, how they put movies together. And, we all talk amongst each other and start saying, what are you working on? Is there something we can do together? And I think that's going to start happening more and more and more. It's not as scary for investors to come into Hollywood if you really treat it like a business and don't just do a passion project. If you want to do a passion project, find somebody who's a benefactor of the arts and is happy to lose their money. Good for you. But if you want to keep going, you got to think it business-like, and you need a producer mindset. The producers thinking about the distribution, producers thinking about the marketing, producers thinking about all the different things that are going to come down the road. What are my pay windows? Where's that going to go? How's my There's a lot to be done there. I should write down, like, when people go, so what does a producer do? And I go, oh yeah, let me get my list out. And he said, here's my.
Well, I have 180 hours explaining what producers do, so you can just
there we go. Right, exactly. Yeah.
Take the load off. Kick into this podcast. That's all we talk about here. Excellent analysis, fellas. And then I always end with the same question, but I'll alter it slightly if it doesn't necessarily apply to you, but maybe it does. I always ask best memory on set, but Wally or Chris, if you have a best memory of a premiere or a movie or a screening, like best memory of what you guys start being in 25-21 so far.
Yeah, I have one that comes to mind very quickly, actually. So we, on our Drummer Boy set, was hanging out with Luke Smallbone, who's one of the producers on Drummer Boy. And he's also for King and Country, him and his brother Joel. And we were doing an interview. We were doing an interview with I don't remember what the horse person's called, the person who trains all the horses for the set. And we had the horse start doing tricks, and Luke acted like he was interviewing the horse, which was absolutely ridiculous. And man, it was just really funny. We were all just giggling behind him like we were 12-year-olds. I don't think it'll ever see the light of day, that interview, because it was so dumb. But it was hilarious. It was a good time.
That's funny. That's great. Yeah. Chris?
I think my favorite 25-21 one. And by the way, for any young producers that are starting out, my actual favorite memory of all time was the night before my first movie. A guy that I was working with he'd had the experience, and we checked out the set the night before, and he said, remember this moment, because tomorrow the rocket is lit and it's going to go so fast you're not going to even have a second to see what happens. But this is your first movie, and take a look at this thing and enjoy this moment because you only get it once. So I would say if you're a young person, do that. But
That's
my
great.
2521 one, thank you. My 2521 one is sitting on set when we were doing Brick of War, and Jared Harris is talking. He's across the table from Jeff who's playing Reagan, Jeff Daniels, and something happened on the line, and I'm like, oh, he looks like he's forgetting his line there. And I was like, all right, well, we'll go to it. I'm in the video village, right? And all of a sudden, he slams his hand down the table so hard that I jumped, and he was like, I was like, oh man, he's really angry.
The arrogance of the Americans.
This is not going to be good. And then he said his line, and I realized he was only acting. It was so real. I was ready to go on set and be like, okay, we got to calm an actor down kind of thing. But I was like, wow, that was good acting. Holy smokes, that was good acting. How many movies have we seen in our lifetime? And to still see an actor so in the role that I believed it 100%, and I was sitting right there, and I knew the script. I knew what he was going to say, and yet it was that real. And I just thought, I love this business. That's so amazing. This is just amazing. So
amazing. Thanks for tuning in for this episode of The Producer's Guide. If you're a fan of this podcast, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends and family. And if you got any questions about producing, send me a DM on X at Todd_Garner. I want to thank my producer, Steve Delamater. And until next week, I'm Todd Garner. See you then.